In this video, I talk with the artist and musician Damon Frawley about his creative process, his interest in alchemy, and his video and photographic work, which is part of his fourth-year project in the Limerick School of Art and Design. So, let's begin. What is your background as an artist? Are you a student right now or full-time professional? What's your experience?
It's
there?
like I attended so little throughout college that I find it difficult to really tie my practice that much to being a student. Also because so much of what I do is audio that's just sort of not even related to any of the projects that I do in college. It's like I kind of view myself more as a practicing artist than as a student.
Oh, very cool. And so just on the topic of my topic in college is visionary art. So would you consider yourself spiritual in any way, and would you kind of incorporate that into your work at all?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I feel like they've kind of developed alongside each other.
So that would be kind of philosophical as well. Like you started reading, when did you start reading into Jung's work?
I was always interested, but I actually started in my first year project. It was the first project. It was map/mapping was the word, and I was just looking around in the library, and it was like Carl Jung's map of the unconscious mind or something stuck out to me in the library, and I was like, ooh. So I guess that was the very, very start. But the point where I started properly incorporating it, when I sort of knew what I was doing, was I'd say my second year projects is when it really started getting into the kind of archetype stuff and whatnot. But one thing I love in Jung's writing is the amount of just little digs at Freud he throws in. It's like anytime he mentions Freud, he has to just put in a little bracketed, a man whose entire personality is a pathology unto itself and all this stuff. And it's like...
Yeah, I think that's brilliant as well. So, are there any artists you particularly admire that influence your practice? Is there? That's not vocal.
I think the thing that, at least with this current project and the stuff I've been working on the last 6 months or so, my biggest thing has been painters from the 1800s and 1900s. I'm just sort of obsessed with romantic paintings, and also symbolist paintings and also surrealist paintings. And I think painting in a way is sort of my favorite medium, but it's I have no capacity for it whatsoever. Basically, it's I can make my weird little abstract things sometimes, but I'm not very good at painting as a skill from a technical perspective. And I think that might be part of why I'm so enamored with it. It's I'm so kind of obsessed with the idea of trying to recreate the feeling of a Friedrich painting with a camera lens, if that makes sense.
How do you start engaging with your creative process? Do you have a routine that inspires creativity? And would you consider your artistic practice playful or purposeful or both? Something to think about.
Yeah, it's sometimes it's something as simple as my internet goes to shit. So something I do a lot to kind of I mean, I don't do it intentionally to get me into a creative zone, but it's what ends up happening. It's if my internet is cut out and I really want to listen to a song, I'll just look up a tab for the song and learn how to play it instead while I'm waiting for my internet to come back. And it's kind of just doing stuff like that to normalize engaging with the creative process just in your day-to-day life, just bit by bit. It's I try to just sort of always be taking photos, or just always be learning some new song, or just always messing around with a bit of audio production or something. It's kind of I feel if you keep it at the forefront of your psyche, it's easier to nurture it and be more focused in what you're doing. And so in that sense, I'd say it's playful for the most part. My approach is definitely what other people have described as playful, I suppose, because it's a lot of it is me doing things that I don't necessarily technically know how to do, but like trying to like create a certain impression of like an aesthetic or a sound or whatever else. So a lot of it is just messing around and trial and error. It's like the purposefulness only really comes in afterwards, because the way I work generally is kind of like, I guess it's like shoot first, ask questions later. Like I generally like create the thing and then kind of develop ideas around it, if that makes sense. Because I sort of feel like intuition is probably the purest drive you can have with making stuff, like more so than like, you know, having a big gigantic fleshed out concept. Like for me the concept generally nearly always comes after, like I mean it comes kind of simultaneously, but the writing it all up, the like distilling the ideas and stuff, that's always kind of the after part of my process.
That brings me on to the next question. Like, would you consider it, your process, therapeutic and meditative? Is that kind of like how you'd experience your process?
Definitely therapeutic, not always meditative. Like, well, meditative in the sense that it like kind of induces this sort of flow state where it's like you kind of don't really like think of your physical body in relation to anything. You just kind of close your eyes and it's as if you're just kind of in the process. It's kind of cool. It feels like having a superpower when you can just like engage with a flow state like so suddenly like that, and then before you know it you've like just like spent 2 hours like, and it's dark and like but something has been made and it's there and it's like, oh, I wonder what that is, and that's when I start writing all the concept stuff.
See, that's
Or
good.
like, or sometimes I'll make something, then examine it like a few days later, and then kind of like get to thinking what it probably means, because it's like, I don't know, like how much control do we even have over what the stuff we make means, even when we're being purposeful about it, you know?
Very true. Does your work aim to say anything? And if so, what is it?
I'm not sure if saying anything is like what it's trying to do. I mean, there's loads of words in what I do lots of the time, but it's kind of like, it's more like catharsis than trying to make a point. It's kind of like, if I wanted someone to take a message from it, only message I feel like someone just covered this from this current body of work, like with this current like piece, is just a sort of like message of wholeness or whatever, like just a sort of acknowledgement of like spiritual, material, and physical wholeness.
Externalizing your delusional preoccupations, right?
Yeah, basically.
That's the best thing I've read to explain it.
Yeah, I have to like take that down.
So let's actually talk about this booklet, will we? So I was studying your work last night, or looking at your work last night, and you sent me a booklet divided into 4 parts, hinting at this, you know, mysterious story, right? So they were accompanied with 4 instrumental music clips, which matched up to the 4 parts of the story. And then the 4 stages are obviously inspired by the 7 stages of alchemical transformation. So is there a reason why you chose to include only the first 4 stages?
Space limitation, and also my tutor suggested that if they had like leftover printing capability, I'd be able to do a second volume.
Oh.
So I am sort of like putting together a second volume of it, which is why I'd only covered the first 4 phases, because if I tried to cover all of them, I would have only really gotten like 1 image each, and I don't think the body of work I had would have encapsulated the whole thing.
So I just want to ask you about the chosen images. So you have the moon, the cloaked figure, the trees, and what seems to be a pink rose. I feel like you mentioned that briefly before.
So the Rose of Sharon is like a biblical thing. It's like, well, it predates like the Christian Bible. It's like Old Testament thing, but like in alchemy, it's referred to in a specific way and used as like a symbol of alchemical unity, like wholeness, which like kind of connects back to this like Jungian archetype stuff.
Tell me a story about the synchronicity. Do you want to tell me a bit about that?
Oh, I can't even remember.
So you texted me on Instagram and you're like, I need to tell you this. It's amazing. You were taking
Yeah, I'm
pictures
trying
of
to
the
remember.
you're taking pictures of the rose, and then you were looking up something about the rose,
Oh
and it
yeah,
started
yeah.
like the
And
rose
then
of
it like
Sharon, and then
yeah, and then it turned out to be that, and then that's like my mother's name, and I was like, whoa, what the hell?
and you're following this. So Rose of Sharon is just the name of the plant, is it? Where does that name come from?
No, it's like it's actually debated by biblical scholars what flower it refers to. It's thought that it's not an actual rose anyway, because you know they wouldn't have been somewhere where roses would have like grown, so it was more of an expression to refer to something. I can't specifically remember what its biblical like thing was, but it's such a central thing in alchemy that like I was just looking up generic alchemical symbolism relating to roses, and then it's like, oh right, it turns out the rose is like this big like central thing that is like constantly used, and it's like my entire project had like kind of touched on alchemy up to that point, but it's like the rose and that connection and then that weird personal connection it had for me just all sort of coming together at once. I was like, whoa, okay, I think this is something.
But I want you to tell me about the cloaked figure. So the first image is a red cloak, and there's a very large resemblance of a vagina. I don't know if that's something with the cloak opening up. It's very. That's all I
Didn't
saw.
know.
I don't know if that tells you more about me or.
That's probably why they liked that image so much. Like, I guess that's very like old school art.
Sheila a gig kind of
I
thing.
like that was an interpretation I certainly hadn't like thought of.
How does it evolve?
Yeah,
If you could tell me about that.
yeah. See, I'm reading over my early notes, and like these notes don't really like sum it up at all. This is just what I was thinking of at the start. But it's like, so unified polarities, right? Like Jung's idea of like Abraxas, the Gnostic god, as being like essentially like both God and the devil, like being effect itself, like being the like momentum that affects things. It's sort of about polarities canceling each other out through unification and like forming a new thing, like the self unfolding dialectically, if you will, like opposing forces coming together and then kind of synthesizing to formulate a new thing. Now at the start I had the white cloak as like being directly like persona archetype, and then the red cloak as being like directly like anima archetype, or no, the red cloak was shadow, I think. But it kind of got a bit wavier after that, because it's like once you get very into this thing of like things canceling one another out, like it kind of just continuously plays itself out across everything, especially in the realm of Jungian stuff. It's like there always seems to be like a unifying polarity that like forms another thing. But like the whole idea of Jung's apraxis was that it was imperceptible due to like the continuous negation of the two opposing forces.